Academic and Workforce Analysis and Research Data System, more commonly referred to as Georgia Awards. The development of the system was funded through Race to the Top, and we have now moved into the implementation stage, which is not currently funded. Roughly $106,000 will allow us to employ and equip a data analyst and pay for some annual maintenance costs. The data analyst will allow us to make sense of the data and use it to inform policy decisions. Through Georgia Awards, the data analyst will help us and others answer important questions regarding teacher preparation, teacher performance, certification, professional learning, and teacher retention. And I'll give you just a few examples of the kinds of questions that this data system is going to allow us to address. How effective are our teacher and leader preparation programs, both colleges and universities and RESAs? How can we improve teacher and leader preparation programs? How effective are the math and science endorsements established in Georgia Code? How effective are the new GACE, the teacher content tests that we have implemented? What is the impact of the new tiered certification rule, and what, if any, changes need to be made? What regional factors affect teacher placement? Where do teachers go when they finish a preparation program? Do they tend to go in systems near where their provider exists or where they grew up or other locations? Is there a relationship between teacher retention and what preparation program prepared them? Is there a relationship between teacher retention and their TIM score, teacher effectiveness measurement score? Is there a relationship between teacher retention and the principal's leader effectiveness measure score? These are all incredibly important questions. Secondly, the funding recommended by the governor will allow us to implement House Bill 283 that you passed last year. House Bill 283, among other things, requires school systems to submit available positions to a statewide online database maintained by the state. That database is Teach Georgia, developed and housed by PSC and currently funded through a federal grant. That federal grant goes away this year, and in order for PSC to be able to move that work forward and support HB 283, the funding that we are being allowed to keep will in fact be necessary. Teach Georgia does many things to facilitate employment in this state, and particularly for small and rural school systems, it is fundamental and essential to their HR efforts. We certainly appreciate at PSC your continued support, and I appreciate your time, and if you do have any questions, I will be happy to try to respond.
You have given us a lot of information faster than I can write.
Could I email it to you, Mr. Chairman?
I was going to ask if you would, the notes that you just read from, if you could supply us with a copy of those. I think that would...
How about right now?
That would be just wonderful. And we'll make copies for the members of the committee.
Okay. Other questions?
Any other questions? You have a question.
Dr. Henson, when we visited South Georgia and all across the state for our listening sessions in education, one of the big problems was something that you're addressing with your database, trying to find teachers to go to these small South Georgia systems. We were very interested in trying to implement a back-to-work bill for some of our retirees, not maybe across the state, but just in those areas. Would you be in agreement with such a bill, and are there any other things that you're planning to? I know you're just keeping data, but do you know of anything that's in the burner? We really are, to a great extent, the state's recruitment arm relative to educators. I don't know that I've read the precise legislation you're referring to, but I do have some knowledge of the back-to-work issues, and I would think my answer to your basic question would be yes. I think that would allow school systems more options and latitude relative to employment, relative to small, rural, and hard-to-staff school systems.
I had the opportunity to work on the Race to the Top application. I can tell you we know much better what doesn't work than we do what does. We know that you can't pay educators to go somewhere they don't want to be. Okay, we've tried that 2 or 3 times. It doesn't work. Okay, they don't want to leave their Kroger, they don't want to leave their family, they don't want to leave their church, and you can't pay them enough to make them go somewhere that they don't want to be. There are a couple of initiatives, though, through Race to the Top that I think have great promise. One of them is based on a model out of Texas, You Teach, and that is through the Innovation Grant, and I think that has great promise. And then empowering districts to quote-unquote grow their own, because in many of these small rural districts, Representative Clark, their very best teachers are their graduates who come back to the hometown and are comfortable living there. And we've got to find a way as a state to more empower these districts to resource these people to come back home and quite honestly live in places that some folks wouldn't be comfortable with. That's just my, take that as an opinion and not a policy statement.
Thank you for all of your hard work.
Representative Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Doctor. Good to see you again, sir.
Good to see you, Representative Maxwell.
A couple questions on the Race to the Top money that you guys have gotten through some of these grants. Now, all that money is running away next year?
We have a no-cost extension, which allows us to pinpoint a couple of areas that the money can be extended one additional year. A goodly amount of the Race to the Top funds will end this year. That's correct. But we have 2 major initiatives at PSC that we've gotten the federal government through the Department of Education to give us the extension on. One of that is tiered certification. The other one is Teacher Preparation Program Effectiveness Measures. TPPEM, Teacher Preparation Program Effectiveness Measures, I alluded to in my comments, and that is a really, really outstanding accountability system for any institution that prepares teachers. That will be up and running and consequential in, as best I can recall, about 18 months. And it's going to allow us to identify the strong preparation programs and support and enhance them. It's going to allow us to identify the weak preparation programs and improve them. And after a 3-year period, what's written in is if the weak program doesn't improve, then we close the doors to that weak program. That is going to be probably the single biggest step forward regarding teacher preparation we've taken in this state in quite some time. That was part of it. The tiered certification is really a massive change. Probably the single biggest change, though, in tiered certification is with student teaching. It really puts an emphasis on student teaching, and because of what has now been added to the student teaching experience, we will be able, when this rule is fully implemented, to pretty much guarantee a school or a district that when somebody exits the student teaching experience, they just don't know the content. They have demonstrated that they can effectively teach children. What a major step forward with student teaching. There are many other things in tiered cert, but I know your time's limited today. But Representative Maxwell, those are the 2 major initiatives that will be moving forward at PSC.
Are you going to have funds to continue that on, or have to come back and ask for more funds once that money runs out?
We did get the no-cost extension to continue that work right now. It does appear that the no-cost extension will allow us to effectively continue it through next year, but we've already had conversations with the Office of Planning and Budget that there is no funding to continue that work beyond the no-cost extension.
Oh, wow. One more question, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. Try to be quick. Did we move in the certification for pre-K last year? Has that been implemented yet?
No, sir. We discussed that, and I know Representative Clark worked on that, and we had some discussions. Okay. We do a lot of the quality registry work for pre-K, and you're going to hear from their agency head today. We have a very strong working relationship when it comes to quality and personnel. That will only be greatly enhanced through this wonderful grant that they've achieved. But in terms of a lot of the ethics work, if you will. We made a decision not to move that forward. I think it's a good idea, but it was probably a bit premature.
Okay. I remember a discussion on that. I didn't know where we stand with it. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
And Representative Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Dr. Henson, how are you?
How are you this afternoon?
Great. I wanted to know on the tiered certification, the teacher preparation, is there somewhere on your website or that we can really look at it and see what it looks like? And I'll tell you why I ask. It's not that I really need to see it as much as the teacher preparation piece. Is it purely academic, or are there other components to it, like as far as climate of the classroom?
In terms of the teacher preparation program effectiveness measures, there are 4 components to the evaluation, and I'm going to see if I can remember them off the top of my head. The first and largest component is the academic achievement of the students taught by the graduates of that institution. Okay. That is the single largest component. And of course, we'll be working very closely with the department on the new statewide teacher evaluation system to develop those measures. We also look at things like yield and placement. We look at items such as how successful is an institution's teachers in moving through the first 3 years and signing that 4th contract. Teacher retention, if you will. Okay. And so we look at how successful is a teacher preparation institution relative to importing content knowledge to their graduates. In other words, their GACE scores, their teacher content test scores. All of this goes into an accountability measure that's incredibly strong. It's really being looked at as a model by many other states. And quite honestly, it will allow us to effectively judge those that prepare teachers, to reward those that are doing a great job, to improve those that aren't, and ultimately, if an institution won't improve, to see that they no longer prepare teachers in the state. One other thing I'll mention, which is extremely important. Doesn't matter what kind of institution prepares the teacher, they will be subject to these same accountability measures. Colleges and universities with traditional programs, yes. Georgia TAP programs through RESAs, yes. Teach for America, yes. If you prepare teachers in the state of Georgia, these accountability measures will be applied even-handedly to all preparation programs.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Henson.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm fine. Thank you.
I didn't have any.
Sure.
Yes, I think so. We should have taken care of all the representative concerns and discuss that whenever it's appropriate. So that should be just fine.
Okay, next up is the Office of Student Achievement, Martha Ann Todd. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The Office of Student Achievement is charged with maintaining the statewide academic auditing program and publishing the annual state report card that's required for federal accountability purposes. Beginning in July of 2012, we undertook the administration of an innovative program, the State Reading Mentor Program, with the goal of increasing literacy rates throughout Georgia. And in August of 2013, we undertook the management of the Governor's Honors Program, another innovative program which supplements the work going on and begun in our office around the Race to the Top Innovation Fund. We have several other projects funded by Race to the Top dollars, including the Georgia Awards Longitudinal Data System, which Dr. Henson referenced in his comments to you, and the Race to the Top evaluation work that we're doing for many of their projects. The Governor's Office of Student Achievement is supportive of the Governor's recommendations for FY15, which are found on page 44 in your tracking document. The annual operating budget that's recommended for FY15 is $10,128,986, which is an increase from the current budget of $7,271,837. Those dollars are represented here in your document in 6 line items. The first 3 line items represent common state changes, providing funds for the merit-based pay adjustments and employment recruitment, $17,375. Line 2612-2, increase the funds to reflect an adjustment in the employer share of the retirement system, ERS, $77,290. Line 2612-3 is increase the funds to reflect adjustment in the employment share of the teacher's retirement system, $6,060. The 3 additional lines, 2612-4, represent the work in our office that is either new work or work that we are moving from federal funding to state funding. 2612-4 is to provide funds to create a Georgia Innovation Fund to award grants for the implementation and dissemination of innovative Georgia programs in public education, $5 million. 2612-5 is to increase state funds for 5 positions and operating expenses for the Georgia Academic and Workforce Analysis and Research Data System, otherwise known as Georgia Awards or the P20 Data System, $1,039,178. 2612-6 reflect an executive order to transfer funds from the governor's for the Governor's Honors Program from the Department of Education, which was $961,934, and increase those funds for additional program cost in the amount of $170,000 for a total budget item of $1,131,934. The FY15 funds for the innovation funds will be used to support the expansion and replication of current successful Georgia innovative programs in the areas of teacher and leader induction, applied learning, and STEM education, to pilot blended learning initiatives in schools throughout the state, and to identify which types of innovative programs, strategies, partnerships, and practices are already being used in Georgia to successfully advance student achievement, have promise for replication, and can be scaled up to be successful on a wider basis, and also in order to influence future education policy efforts. The FY15 funds for Georgia Awards, the P20 data system, will be used to fund salaries and benefits for 5 positions, down from 8 that are currently funded by the Race to the Top dollars in our agency, which would include a program manager, a data architect, a business analyst, a system administrator, business intelligence support, and would cover operating costs for the software licenses, the server hosting, space rental, and data contracts needed to maintain the system. The FY15 funds for the Governor's Honors Program will be used to pay the program manager's salary and benefits, pay for federal background checks of summer staff, fund the summer program staff stipends in FY15, pay the Valdosta State University contract costs for the summer program, which include things like facility use, room and board, student health clinic fees, and other related services, purchase computers and other instructional supplies that might be needed for the summer program, and pay expenses associated with other necessary Governor's Honors Program activities, such as the student interviews, faculty training, and planning workshops. I will be glad to answer any questions that you might have about any of those items or the work in our office.
Okay. Are the grants in 2612.4, are those going to be competitive grant applications?
Yes, sir. They will be competitive grant applications.
Okay. Are there questions? Yes. Representative Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ma'am, for being here. I got a question about the grants also. Years ago, I'm still recovering a school board member. And when I got into the school board, we applied for grants for everything. Needed money before we could get it. But wasn't but a few years down the road, we come to find out those grants were quickly going away as fast as they would come in. What's the long-term project on funding these grants? When people get them, get something going, the next thing you know, the money's cut off, and then it's a heck of a lot easier to start a program than it is to stop one in a lot of cases.
That's true. I can speak to that from the examples of some of the Race to the Top grantees that have been funded using the Race to the Top monies that began this work. One example was referenced by Dr. Henson, the UTeach program, which is one of the innovative programs that was funded using the Race to the Top dollars. Those programs have been developed and put in place at Southern Polytechnic State University, the University of West Georgia, and Columbus State University. And those universities began the work understanding that the grant period was limited and making the commitment to build the structure and resources within their universities to continue the work after the grant ended. So this projected enrollment for their grant for next year, and they have an extension for that particular one for next year, they are projected to serve 582 students, and this is to develop those hard-to-find teachers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and place those in districts. But those universities have made the commitment and have plans in place to continue to fund and sustain those programs. With all of our other grantees, the same kinds of conversations have taken place. It would be unwise of me to say to you that they would all be as successful as the UTeach program, possibly in sustaining the work, but that's the goal with which we begin the work. And many of them will be very successful in sustaining and continuing the work afterward. One of the things that we will be looking for in determining the grantees will be that we award to in the competitive process will be grantees that meet the priorities that we will set, but also really focusing on the things that have potential to be successful models for things that can be replicated in other systems and potentially scaled up statewide. So we'll be very conscientious about looking at things that can be sustained.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a couple more? Thank you. It didn't look like you were sure. 12.5, ma'am. 5 operating positions. The Georgia. Now that was Race to the Top funds there, so that's going to have to be continued. That $1 million be funded every year once we move forward. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is fewer positions than we're required to develop, design, and build the system. Now that the development work has been done, we will be reducing the staff and running this program, maintaining the systems and running it with fewer staff members. But that will be an ongoing cost.
Okay. And the last question, 12.6. What's our total amount that we put into the Governor's Honors Program every year? The
total amount has been being for the Department of Education $961,934,000 or in that vicinity. The amount that the amount we're requesting is slightly more than that, $170,000 increase.
So that was last year's cost. Mm-hmm. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me go back to what he was talking about, the sustainability question.
Yes, sir.
Where he was a board member, I was a superintendent, and
yes,
I had to deal with the same issue. Teachers or principals would come with a plan that they wanted us to fund or a grant application. And we finally realized that we had to make sure that they had a plan for sustainability, not just whether it was a good program, whether it was something that would be beneficial if it was successful, but is it something that we have the means to continue after the grant was done? Is that part of it going to be a part of the grant application?
Yes, sir. That was part of the consideration given to the original Innovation Fund grantees, and it will continue to be part of the consideration. If you would allow me just to mention this,
sure.
In the example of the Georgia Awards, $18 million have been spent in the development of that system, and we're asking for slightly over $1 million to continue and maintain that system. So I think that just provides an example of how sometimes getting started up and building what you need can be far more expensive than maintaining and continuing to implement it.
You've dealt with 5 of the positions that were funded by Race to the Top. Are there others that in the next budget year cycle we're going to have to come back and look at?
In our office, we have additional positions funded by Race to the Top in the area of academic auditing. We have been able to employ 1 additional academic auditor with Race to the Top funds. To be honest with you, looking at the data around the academic audits and the decreasing number of schools that are requiring intensive auditing, I don't foresee that that would be an ask that would have to be continued. The other funding that we have is for program manager for the Innovation Fund, currently paid by Race to the Top funds. We anticipate absorbing that into our budget, going beyond the funding from Race to the Top. And then we have funding for the personnel who are engaged in the evaluation of the Race to the Top work, but when Race to the Top is over, that funding is over, those positions would no longer be needed.
Good answer. Any more questions? If not, we thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Early care and learning.
Great job.
Decal.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present our budget. Refer you to section 21 of the tracking sheet on page 32. This is the proposed funding to support our department in the accomplishment of 2 primary goals within our mission. First, to promote health and safety for children, approximately 450,000 of those on any given day in our state that use facilities in early care and learning. The second is to improve quality in the nearly 8,000 facilities that we have in our state that provide school readiness and maximize learning for opportunities for birth to 5-year-old children. Pretty much the amendments to our budget in 21.1, 21.2, 21.3.1, 21.3.2, and 21.3.3 are all related to the statewide changes with regard to merit-based pay adjustments and employee recruitment and the associated employee retirement system and teacher retirement system increases. Those are relatively small. I would call your attention to line 21.3.1, which is a larger item, $2.043 million. That is a merit-based pay adjustment for our pre-K teachers, with a small amount of that money being devoted to our own pre-K staff. We have about 50 staff. There are 3,800 teachers, 3,800 assistant teachers in our system that are also factored into that line item. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have, Mr. Chairman.
Are there questions for the Commissioner? I'll ask one then. Is it safe to assume that you've been getting the same emails that I've been getting for the last 2 or 3 days about where this $2 million should be directed?
We are getting inquiries about that, and we have begun discussions on that. We have a couple of options available to us, but I think our goal in doing this is to provide something that's equitable to all the teachers involved. And it's a small amount of money relative to the number of teachers that we have. Mm-hmm. So I think the chief goal that we have in administering those funds will be equity for all teachers.
Let's see. I think the overwhelming majority of the emails I've received have focused on assistant teachers.
Yes. We do have a great deal of concern around the compensation level for assistant teachers. Those typically run in the neighborhood of about $13,000 a year for an assistant teacher, which is very, very low. We have talked about that for a good deal of the last year with the provider community as well as with the governor's office, and certainly something that we want to do. We do think that those teachers are very valuable to us. We have about a 30% annual turnover rate in our pre-K program, with teachers, many of those leaving to take K-3 positions. And so with those teachers leaving, us bringing new teachers in, it makes the quality of the assistant teacher even greater in importance, because they really, in many respects, especially if they're well-trained and very experienced, will carry that classroom as the teacher really becomes acclimated to handling a class of 4-year-olds. So we do want to do what is right for those assistant teachers, and we are hearing many of those same things from the provider community.
Are the turnover rates for the assistants equivalent to the turnover rates for the teachers, or is there a
It has
large gap
been more stable. I think we're in the 80% range there. And the concern amongst the provider community, and our concern as well, is that if we don't do something to assist that compensation, then what we're going to have is a turnover rate that may meet or exceed that of the teachers in the classroom, and that will undermine the quality of the program. So we are giving serious consideration to the way that we distribute the funds to recognize the needs that we have with assistant teachers.
I'll let you ask that question.
Sir, do they receive benefits, the assistant teachers?
It depends on what their setting is. The private teachers, we do not mandate benefits there. We do give some allowances for them to have additional funds that can be used for that. We have a salary schedule that we set out. We only require them to pay at 90% of the salary schedule for teachers. For assistant teachers, they have to pay 100% of the salary schedule, which again is very, very low. The benefits really depend upon the size of the provider in many respects. In the private sector, those that work for providers that are larger stand a better chance of having those kind of benefits. In school system, these are typically school system employees receiving school system benefits.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions? Okay, if I see you after the meeting, you'll give me a quote to put in an email response to all these folks that have been emailing me?
Absolutely. You'll have that very shortly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Who's up next? Next up is ERS. This is page 40.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Potvin, the Executive Director of the Employees Retirement System. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you this afternoon. As you know, the lion's share of our budget is not directly appropriated through the General Assembly, but we do have several items that we do make direct requests for, and so I'll cover those. And if you'd like me to talk about the others, I certainly can do that as well. Referring to Section 24 of the tracking document, 24.2, the Georgia Military Pension Fund, and 24.3, the Public School Employees Retirement Systems. These are two systems for which we receive direct appropriation for the employer contributions required for this year. As you can see, they are slightly higher in both cases than they were in FY14. Those are based on the actuarial valuations as prepared by our actuary and approved by our Board of Trustees. On 24.4, system administration is largely funded through the trust fund and not directly. However, we do have one new item this year. The ERS is also the state's Social Security administrator, and while we have not requested any appropriation for our time and expenses for that responsibility in the past, it has come to our attention. We have determined that we needed to do so because we're not supposed to use funds earmarked for ERS or another pension system for any other responsibility. And so this small appropriation is to allow us the ability to pass any direct expenses through this item.
What kind of responsibilities does that entail?
It's actually a fairly minor from a time standpoint, but we are responsible for working with jurisdictions, local jurisdictions. We help them through the process of getting a 218 agreement with the Social Security Administration and sort of beginning their participation in the Social Security system.
Do we still have systems that are trying to get into the Social Security Administration?
It's pretty rare. We get 1 a year, 2 a year at the most.
Okay. Representative Coleman?
Y'all are under the blended program now, correct? How long has it been the blended program for ERS?
The GSEPS program?
Yeah, the blended program.
Yes, that began January 1, 2009, so
2009.
about 5 years now.
Of course, 1% goes to the retirement. It's 1% of the time they years. How many people are, what would you say is the percent of the retention rate of those that are going in the 401k? I've heard conflicting numbers.
About 90% of the individuals who are eligible under GSEPS for the 401k contribute at some level into the 401k plan.
So that large of a number are doing it then?
Yes, but many of them contribute at a low rate, but in terms of just a basic participation number, it's about 90%.
90%. Now, they're allowed to stop after 90 days. Is that still the case?
They have up to 90 days to withdraw entirely from the program, in which case
they got to stay.
Well, they can always choose whether or not they want to contribute to the 401k, but in terms of receiving a refund of any contributions that they've already made, that's the 90-day window.
If they don't do it after 90 days, they have to leave the funds in there.
Correct. Whatever they've contributed at that point stays in the plan, but they can decide whether to continue to contribute after that.
Okay.
Are there other questions?
I'd like to have a bunch.
How about 5?
I don't have any.
No? Okay. You're lucky. You're the only one he hadn't asked a question from. Anything else? If not, thank you very much. Appreciate that. And TRS, Mr. Rizal.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. Jeff Ezell, Executive Director of the Teachers Retirement System. On page 83 of the tracking document, the only direct appropriations we receive are to allow us to make cost of living adjustments to those individuals that retired under the old local retirement systems. Unfortunately, that's an aging group. There's only 19 that receive the floor funds and 38 that receive the COLA, and because they're aging and unfortunately passing away, that appropriations is continually decreasing. It's decreasing $101,000 down to $412,000 for fiscal year 15. And if there's any questions I could possibly answer, regarding that or anything else with the operations of TRS, just ask.
Are there questions?
Jeff, thank you for being here. Now, those people retired, was it prior to 1979 or something?
They retired from, it was City of Rome, Chatham County, Atlanta, and Fulton County. The last one to come under us was 79, and I believe that was Fulton County.
Yeah, I was thinking it was about 79, the last one was there. Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir.
Representative Coleman.
I saw something today, and see if you can explain it to me. You may not know. It was a Senate resolution of a study commission. Do you know anything about that?
I drafted that resolution, so yes, I did.
You draft. Why are we doing that? Now, especially this time.
Well, as you know, over the past 4 or 5 years, we've had to increase our contribution rates. Right. And we project for the next several more years they're going to have to continue to increase. From a strategic planning standpoint, it makes sense to look at whether or not the state wants to continue providing the existing TRS plan for new employees only. And it's new teachers only, or possibly look at another variation of a benefit plan to provide. And it's important that it's done sooner than later, because if there were to be a change made, and that's a big if, then it's probably going to be 4 or 5 years into that new system once it passes, if it were to pass, before it has any impact on those increasing contribution rates.
I can't tell you how many today, hundreds of emails I'm getting. I just wonder what's happened. I mean,
the critical,
the principals and teachers,
the critical thing is it does not impact a current member of the system, nor does it impact any current retiree of the system.
Well, I know that, but they're not. They know that, but they're saying it's destroying their ability to recruit teachers. You're putting. I mean, I'm just. And there was no warning, they said, and it just hit them, and that's why I couldn't believe. I'm just concerned at this time that we're getting this and getting the teachers stirred up again.
Well, again, it's just a study committee to look at available options that are out there. If there is even an option, it may be determined from this committee that the current plan as designed does exactly what it was intended to do, and that's provide very adequate retirement security and to provide a tool for retention in the profession. It's just a study committee to look at if that's still the course the state wants to continue on.
I haven't had a chance to read out one more question. Is there anything in there about venture capital?
No.
Oh, that's good. They've said it was. I'm going to. Thank you.
Thank you. Howard has number 2.
How's our funding level now since the stock market came up last year? Have we seen an increase in funding level? Because one time we were about 100% funded for our liabilities, and it dropped to about 80%, I believe.
You've been around too long, Howard. It's been a while since we've been 100% funded. Our last complete valuation was for fiscal year 2012, and we were right at 80, I think it was 83% funded. Projections for the 2013 is showing us right at about 81% funded. Okay. The markets have been well as of. I'm going to give 2 different numbers here. Right. At the end of June, we were about $58.5 billion in assets. Into December, we were 64.1 in assets. As we all know, the past several weeks have not been favorable because of issues going on, overseas. But our assets as of yesterday are $62.1 billion. Okay. So we're in good shape.
Okay. The new. I can't remember the bill that was passed about how we have to show that. We've got to state the funding if we were going out of business today, which we know we're not, but there was a bill passed a year or so ago that said we had to restate our liability, assuming we were going out of business at a particular.
What you're referring to is the change in the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. There were 2 GASB statements that were issued during the past year, 67, that impacts the way we report. And it basically means we do instead of using a smooth value of our assets to try to maintain a level amount of contributions, we have to use market value at that point in time, which means it's going to bounce around. But again, that's just for financial reporting. What GASB did was divorced financial accounting from actuarial accounting. And then 68 impacts the way that our employers have to report the pension liabilities on their financial statements.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. We will open it up for those who might want to have public comment. Mr. Ezell, if you can stick around for just a minute, I need to see you when we get through.
I've got to answer that question too. It's one thing I ask.
Good. Good. Thank you. Are there any who wish to come and speak? Those who had questions for testing and curriculum, it looks like you're off the hook too. So, with that, we will call this meeting adjourned. Oh, would you like to make? Oh, you're not off the hook. You have the microphone.
There's some confusion on the testing. You know, we talked with you outside the other day, and Representative Jones asked that I ask this question. We have the graduation test for the blended math. Is that correct? No. We don't. See, that's what we thought you said. We have it for the traditional math?
Well, the graduation test is being based...
No, I'm talking about the end of course test.
The course test is based on the new courses, which are coordinate algebra and analytic geometry. It's not integrated in the way that Math 1, Math 2 were integrated. It's more of a hybrid approach.
That's right.
So it's not completely discrete, but it's not integrated either. So a lot of the geometry in coordinate algebra was there when we all took Algebra 1. It just wasn't labeled geometry.
Well, my question from her is, if a child is taken in Fulton County, traditional, whatever, they will not have a test. That's what they don't have a test.
No. The state board rule only names coordinate algebra and analytic
So, to answer her question, that's what she was confused yesterday. That system is going to have to develop that test.
No, they have to offer the state designated.
They've got to offer that one,
And the state designated.
and she said her concern is that child will not do as well because they took the traditional math. Is that true?
That's possibly true. They don't follow the course.
Because they don't haven't had that course.
If they don't follow the course standards, then they will not be.
Because they were teaching the integrated, but now they're taking the traditional. That's what she was. You know who I'm talking about, Dr. Urboso. That was his concern, and so she was right. Jan was right. Then what you told her the other day.
If they're not, the tests follow the courses, and the courses align the standards. If they're not teaching all of the standards in those courses, then their students will not be well prepared for the test.
Okay, that was I answered.
We are adjourned.